welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And I actually forgot to mention in my previous review, which was for 1967's Deadly Sweet, that was my 70th Giallo review. So I'm getting up there. 108th Italian film overall. So this will be my 71st. Not very special, but I forgot to mention it in the previous one. But before I get to the review, here are some other Giallo reviews that'll be coming shortly. And I'm getting down to the end of my wish list, so that's very exciting. But we have Iguana with the Tongue of Fire, Bloodstained Butterfly, and Pajama Girl Case. Heard mixed, heard good, heard not so great. And all Arrow releases, I just turned all the jackets around. But for this video, this is one I'm very excited to get to because this is one I've heard awesome things about. I love the title, and it's the first and only release I have from Shameless Films. I actually bought it from their website. And it's 1976's The House with the Laughing Windows. And yeah, I turned this jacket around as well. Yeah, I actually bought this from Shameless. This is a Region 2, which, quick story, I bought a Region 2 DVD player for this reason and for future films. So this was my test film, put it in, it played, but I couldn't get the subtitles to work because it's only in Italian. So just for the hell of it, popped it in the PS4. It played and subtitles, so I guess I didn't really need it, but it's still good to have. Yeah, this is one that has been on my radar for quite a while because I've heard a lot of people say great things about this. And for a while, it was kind of hard to find, especially for Region 1. So when I found it on Shameless, which they have a great catalog and great prices, I had to get it. Plus, I like how Giallo comes in the yellow cases. Yellow. So yeah, in 1976, it was co-written and directed by, and I don't like saying this guy's name because I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but Pupi Avati. Also co-written by Antonio Avati, which I'm guessing is his brother. And it stars Lino Cappuccio, who would go on to be in The Bloodstained Shadow. Oddly enough, both characters are named Stefano. Francesca Marciano, whose character name is Francesca as well. And Gianni Cavina. And the music is by Amidio Tomasi, and I believe this is the only film I've seen where that's been the composer. So it came out in 1976, put out by Euro International Films, or AMA was the production company. And I believe this is the only way to get it. Apparently there was a video where Eli Roth discusses this and Giallo, saying this is a great place to start in Giallo, and compared it to Argento, Bava, and Fulci. Now, oh, that's contemporary reviews. Has a fresh rating, so that's cool. Now, the thing about this film is I do kind of like it, or liken it to like The Bloodstained Shadow, not just because it has the same lead actor playing a character with the same name and kind of the same character, but also it does focus a lot on atmosphere and tone. It is a slower film, but I think this one is a lot more methodical. This is a movie where it's never boring. Sure, there are some scenes that could be shortened to bring it closer to that 90-minute mark, because as is, it sits at 106 minutes. I would say that's a little long for this film, but it's never boring, and it does a great job at laying the groundwork for the twist later on. That was one thing I noticed. It does set a lot up in the very beginning of the film that when you get to the end, you're like, that's awesome. And once you get past that first hour, each revelation is, I mean, a lot of it is pretty predictable. I mean, knowing who the killer is, I saw half the twist coming, kind of suspected the other half, but the way they pulled it off, especially in that last scene, yeah, they kind of go there. It's very eerie. And there's a lot of genuinely creepy scenes in this. It's also very well shot. There's some great cinematography in this. Some great wide shots. Like there's a shot where Stefano finds this giant room in the house he's staying in, which is, you know, alludes to the art studio. And just, it's this wide shot where the camera kind of moves around the room with him, shot beautifully. But then again, there's a scene where it shows him coming up the stairs, and it's this really warped, kind of wavy, shaky cam, more than kind of awkward shaky cam you would get in any film. I don't know if that was intentional, or if that happens with restoration or transfer, but it was rather distracting. Now, the story is, these are the kind of gialli I really like, where someone just feels they need to solve this case and they just become obsessed with it. One of the first gialli I saw was Bird with the Crystal Plumage, and that had a similar kind of story. You know, someone just becomes so obsessed with this case. And the thing is, it's not really a murder mystery. It's trying to solve a mystery of the past, which is very interesting. I mean, there are some murders. There's one in the beginning that kind of sets things off, and then there's a couple more towards the end when everything is coming together. And for a while, I was thinking, you know, this is pretty decent. I mean, it's slow, but it's methodical. It's got some great scenes, some great shots. The acting is fairly solid. I mean, the guy that plays Stefano, he does fine, but like in Bloodstained Shadow, a lot of his acting is like just silently reacting to things intensely. But once everything started coming together, I was thinking, wow, this is awesome. Is it a contender for an honorable mention in a top 10? No, but in that sort of no man's land mid area, it is more towards the top. Even if it is just for the last half hour. I mean, So Sweet, So Dead was kind of like that as well. Although I will say that had more happening throughout the film. But I do like gialli that does take the time to help set the mood, set the atmosphere, really sort of build the mystery around the past. And I thought that was a really nice take on it. Because plus, this was 1976, so Italy had already made the transition from Giallo to Polizieschi as the dominant genre. The 1974-75 transitional period of hybrid films was already over. Polizieschi was already the dominant genre. Giallo was kind of out. But this is one of the better, if not the best, Giallo of that mid to late 80s sort of downer period before Argento kind of revamped it again with a Tenebrae. So 9 minutes in, why not get to the story? So the opening shot, I loved. I mean, if you follow my channel, you know I love silent films and German expressionist films. It starts out with this slow motion up close of a guy who's tied up in this position, screaming, but it's in like this really out of focus, washed out sepia tone. In other shots of like a knife, and up close shots of the wound, and then you get this like muffled whispering about, you know, like my colors, my colors. It runs in my veins, goes through people's eyes, smooth like syphilis. You know, very eerie sounding stuff. And then we just get the still of the guy tied up, dead, with like the forest backdrop behind him, and it looks like a picture from the 1920s. It feels like an expressionist film. Very well done. So it takes place in the province of Ferrara, in northern Italy, like this sleepy, quiet, small town where there's not too many people. It has sort of a bad history. People have gone missing, people leave. And Stefano was hired to restore this painting in a church fresco, because the previous painter, Legnani, I believe his name was, started it 20 years ago and then vanished. We get the idea he vanished, but as the movie goes on, there's more to it. And, you know, eventually he has a friend there named Antonio who's there to test the water, and he starts off by saying, hey, there's this big secret about this town called, about the house with laughing windows. I'm going to take you to the house with laughing windows. But then one night, Stefano gets a call from him while he's having dinner with, I think the guy that runs the restaurant, but talking about the painter, who the guy has a bunch of his work. The guy's wife is very into the work, and he gets a call from Antonio saying, I gotta talk to you immediately. I've discovered a horrible secret. But when Stefano gets to the apartment building, he's thrown out the window. People see it, rule it as a suicide, but Stefano sees a silhouette up in the room. Now, he's staying at this house that's owned by this elderly woman that's bedridden, but he keeps, you know, it starts out like he hears noises, thinks he sees someone, hears noises throughout the house. Stefano starts getting like whispery phone calls saying, don't touch the painting, leave the painting alone. But previously when he was talking to the buyer, or the guy at the restaurant, he said that Legnani was known as the painter of agonies, very dark, morbid painter, believed to be mad, you know, obviously by the time he vanished. And sort of one of the first signs that this movie's gonna go some places is he tells him, and we get a flashback, that he had contracted syphilis, and after a while he couldn't find any models, so when he couldn't, he would mix the colors with the syphilis on his arm, and he would paint himself in the mirror, because there's one painting of a nude woman but with a man's face, and that's when he tells him that story, which I will say foreshadowing, but before I get to spoilers. And that's a fine line between all-out gross out and subtle and disturbing. Gross out would be the guinea pig film Mermaid to Manhole, where there's the pus-filled boils that the guy uses to paint. Here, it's subtle, implied, you get a little bit of a look, but the way it's given is far more disturbing. And yeah, that's just a taste of where this movie goes. Oh, and of course, when Antonio calls him and says, I have to tell you something horrible, you already know he's going to be killed, because no one successfully meets up with anybody to tell them something important. Oh, and he showed this house. Stefano was shown the elderly woman's house by this guy, Lido, or Lidio, who's a young weirdo who's an altar boy at the church. He shows him the house when he needs a place to stay. And he has like this kerosene can, which when Stefano was talking to the old woman, Stefano was shown giving it to someone upstairs. And the movie really wants you to think he's the person. He's the obvious red herring. Because one of his quirks is he finds a mouse and talks about how you have to boil them alive and they're good. When during Antonio's funeral, he tells him, I put a live mouse in there for him. And there's more stuff with him later on for when I get to spoilers, but he's the obvious red herring. And yeah, there is, like I said, when he's talking to the old woman, great shot of up the stairs with him handing the can to an unseen person. So he is in on it to some extent, but so just to speed this up, oh, another thing that makes it sound odd was before he was staying in a hotel, and he had to leave because there was a bus full of tourists coming in, and he had to leave. But while he's packing his room, he asked about the tourists, and they say, we haven't had any since the 40s, which might foreshadow the very last shot of the film and what leads to the last scene. Which the very last shot, I'm still not 100% on what it was. I have an interpretation, but I don't know if that's accurate. So yeah, then there's the shaky cam and how he walks around. He finds that one room with the wide shot that follows him around. Oh, then he finds this old reel-to-reel recording with the colors sort of madman whispering, which he goes to the hotel to talk to this woman, this teacher, who's like the prostitute that he was with at the beginning, but she's been replaced by the young and pretty Francesca. Eventually they hit it off. He goes home, sees her, which in between there is a conversation between him and the priest at the church where they talk about the painting because the painting depicts a martyr in this position being stabbed by two females. The priest isn't a big fan of it. But, oh, and then there's something about a lighter that Francesca has that I think is supposed to show Stefano's obsession with this case because the initials are the same as the painters. But at one point he goes to this house, which this old, abandoned, dilapidated house, and this driver by named Coppola stops, and he says, what are you doing here? He asks him if he knows about the painter that used to live there, and he tells him a story about how the painter, when he was younger, him and his two sisters and his mother went to Brazil to find their fortune. Mother died in Brazil. The three kids came back as angry, poor beggars. And it was around this time he was known as Painter of Agonies, because when Coppola was a boy, his mother was dying of some illness, and the painter was painting her. And then he talks about how his sisters drove him mad because they had some sort of a relationship, which hints towards incest. A few people in the film do. I've actually, it's not even hint, it's kind of blatantly obvious. And then Francesca kind of starts to go a little insane and upset that Stefano's becoming so obsessed, because when he goes to clean out Stefano's room, he finds like a notebook with a bunch of notes and pictures, and that would be a good place to get to spoilers, because that's really where the film kind of, because that's about an hour in, and that's, again, it is methodical and slow, but once you get to that point, it just opens right up and it doesn't stop, and it's worth it. It pays off so well. This is one of the best Giallo to do that, to have a slow or a slower build up, and then just deliver with the ending. So yes, highly recommend this. I think the only way you could get it is through Shameless, but if you have a region-free player or apparently a PS4, definitely check it out. I really enjoyed it. Definitely worth picking up. And yeah, I'm glad to own something from Shameless. So, and with that, I'm gonna get the spoilers, so. So at one point, Stefano says he's done with the restoration of the painting, but then when he's questioned about it, he goes to look at it and it's been destroyed. He takes a little bit of, he scrapes something off of it, and when he tests it, it's some sort of acid, a uric acid or something like that. But when he goes to question the shop owner, he says, I sell that to everyone. It's cleaner, it's rat poison. But when he says that, Lidio pops up behind him. And so when Stefano says, who did you sell it to? Lidio comes up and the store owner kind of shoos him away and he walks away. Which kind of hints towards what was in the beginning of the film with the whole, we have tourists coming in, so you have to leave, and it's someone else saying, we don't have tourists. Which also to hint towards Lidio being the weirdo. When Stefano sees that his restoration has been stripped and destroyed, Lidio's there laughing his ass off. And he's like, basically doing like a Joker impression, like, I don't know, could have been someone did it. So that's when he promises Francesca that they're gonna leave the following morning. But that's when he leaves to go talk to someone, but he ends up talking to Coppola. Coppola tells him that he's been fired as a cab driver, and pretty much that he's been paid in booze to be quiet, which I think that's the moment that shows that's why everyone else is kind of keeping quiet about this and being kind of shady. And, he admits that the two sisters are still alive because in Antonio's scrapbook, he finds this picture of these two women that when he looks at them and he looks at the painting that he's been restoring, the two women stabbing the martyr are obviously the sisters. So Coppola says, yeah, they're still alive. And they bring him models so he can paint them as they kill them. Oh, and also the scrapbook talked about human sacrifices and how people can bring back the dead still, which maybe that has something to do with the final shot. I don't know how I feel about that. That brings a little too supernatural into it. Also, we find out that that's much later. But then Coppola takes him to the dilapidated house where they met, and he shows that just beneath the soil are bones of the models. Stefano walks around the corner, and he sees that there's 4 paintings of these mouths over the shutters. So the house with laughing windows. And that's really the only shot of the film with the house with laughing windows. That's when he realizes that's the house that Antonio was talking about. But while this is going on, Lidio shows up at the house with Francesca. And not only does he violently try to rape her, he keeps saying, "You want to know who the lady upstairs is? Do you want to know who the lady upstairs is?" Which that put it in my mind, okay, she's one of the sisters. Which I was right. But the other half, I kind of guessed. I kind of wondered. I was like, what if they go in that direction? I didn't know it was going to go that far. But, you know, when Stefano comes home, he finds Francesca tied up in that same big art room, which is that scene, which she's all bloody. And so, of course, he goes to get the cops, but when they show up, the room is clean, which did happen earlier, because when Coppola is telling the story, he plays the recording for him, but there's nothing on it. So I thought it was going to have a little bit of a supernatural touch to it, but it's obvious there's someone there hiding things when it's convenient. But then he's like, oh, no, if she's not here, I can show you where they buried her. He shows her the burial ground at the house. They don't find anything. But then Coppola is found in a body of water. They say he drowned because he was a drunk. And, you know, the guy that hired him, Salmi, to do the restoration, he told him to just come stay at the hotel. You know, sorry it happened, but, you know, go to the police tomorrow like you were asked. They'll figure it out. But while he's at the hotel, he gets a phone call from Francesca saying, come back to the house. I'm scared. Help me. But we see there's a hand holding a phone to the recording. Someone recorded her before she died. When he gets there, he goes up to the room. Oh, which actually, around this time, before the phone call, and he goes up there, he's talking to the restaurant owner again, with the wife that had all the paintings. And he said that the night he disappeared, he set himself on fire. And we do get a scene, which far away, yeah, there's a stuntman on fire, but up close, it's this kind of awkward, shoddy, just the actor, like, with, like, flames around it. It looked kind of silly. And that his wife was rather fond of him as a person and really got upset and has since been near catatonic or mute since. But then he gets the phone call, goes to the house, and when he goes up to the room, he sees that Lidio is now tied up, being stabbed, and we see the two sisters. One is the elderly woman, and she opens this cabinet, which has a giant glass jar with the rotted body in it, preserved in formaldehyde, which is what that can was that Lidio gave in the beginning of the film. But the way it's presented is very eerie, like, because it's Stefano's POV, and she's just like, you want to see our brother? Come here. Come on. Come look. It's very eerie. Lidio was killed, and they're saying, like, he's our model now. They called him a spy, so Lidio was involved to an extent. But, and then Stefano was stabbed. Like, he's going to be the next model. But in that scuffle, I guess, we only see the elderly woman's face. We only see the other sister back too. Which I did pick up on, and I'm like, okay, maybe they're just not going to show it. Maybe that's the final twist. He's able to get away. But the next day, as he's stabbed, he goes to the restaurant buyer for help. We see him standing at the window, and he shuts the blinds. He goes to Salmi, who, again, shuts the blinds, calls the cops. He goes to the marshal's door. He doesn't answer. So again, it's like everyone's keeping quiet about it. And then he goes to the church. The priest helps him in and then reveals, you know, I'm the other sister. Which I thought, what if he's the other killer? I didn't think it was going to be the actual sister. Because he starts singing in an elderly woman's voice and kind of doing this, like, cheeky old woman laugh. And then he undoes his priest robe. He has the bloody dress underneath. But then there's up close of a naked breast, which cuts from that to his face. And again, just trying to put that together in your mind is nightmarish. And then the other sister comes in and it shows Stefano, which he starts like muttering like sister's still alive, sister's still alive, I knew it, sister's still alive. I thought it was gonna be another recording and he was gonna be the next martyr. It didn't quite go that far. But while he's saying all that, that's when the priest starts to reveal herself. And again, very creepy. Hear the elderly woman's singing voice and giggle coming out, and the way they revealed that with his old man face, insinuating it's the same body. Very creepy. And then as the two sisters approach him, the final shot is of the church. There's a tree in the foreground, and we just see someone kind of set their hand on it. Freeze frame, roll credits. Now, I took it as the whole town knows what's going on, and they're all kept quiet. I'm guessing from these two sisters, out of fear. Yeah, probably out of fear. They kept quiet for whatever reason. That's why everyone shut the blinds on him while he was bleeding in the street. Or because there was something in the note about how people still today can talk to the dead through these ritualistic communions. Maybe that's why they let them do their thing, and maybe that was their brother or the spirit of their brother. I'm going with the former on this one, that the whole town is just keeping it quiet and someone's kind of watching. But that final reveal I thought was wow, because again, I knew it was the landlady, the elderly lady, especially when Lidio was assaulting Francesca, and when he said, you want to know who the old lady is? That really sealed it for me. But again, kind of giving it away like that made the second half of that twist of it being a priest and actually being a woman, made it that more extreme. And I like how they didn't show the face of that other sister. Didn't really have to, because everything was so on the other sister and her being so fucking creepy that it felt pretty natural. And then how far they went with just showing that. Awesome. Definitely. So yeah, the score might not be anything to write home about. The acting, is decent. But it's got this really well thought out, like, methodical pace, which starts out slow, but after he finds that scrapbook, it really starts picking up. The way it lays its groundwork for later on is very well done. I was quite impressed. I really did enjoy this film. So that is 1976's House with Laughing Windows. Very good Giallo. Stay tuned, and I will try to get to these three as soon as possible. Thank you for watching.